are watching Political Conversations.
Good evening and welcome to Political Conversations of Freedom Square TV. My name is still Uchenna Lanyoke. Today we are going to have a critical look at a matter that will shape and continue to shape the future of democracy in our country. And that matter is the issue of the Electoral Act 2026 that was just signed into law yesterday by Mr. President. We want to take a look at what are the issues, what are the challenges, and are there any prospects? But before we dive into that, let me just give my thoughts. Elections represent the heartbeat of democracy. The credibility of elections depends largely on the strength of the electoral law guiding the process. You may ask, what is new? What are the gray areas? What challenges remain? And what prospects lie ahead for Nigeria's democratic journey? To help us around this conversation, I'm being joined by a veteran analyst, Dr. Chikezi Obasi. Dr. Chikezi Obasi is the Secretary of the Guild of Public Affairs Analysts of Nigeria Enugu State Chapter. He's also a medical doctor. I call him the data expert. Doc, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Papa Knight. Good evening, our listeners and our viewers.
Okay, I'm sure you know, or you watched, or you read that yesterday, the controversial electoral amendment bill that was passed by the National Assembly, that just a day after it was passed, amidst legislative controversies, Mr. President swiftly signed it into law yesterday. And over Nigeria, a lot of people have said, there was this other issue, it took Mr. President 1 year to sign. Then somebody said, no, if he fails to sign it, there's an election on Saturday happening in Abuja. So what would they use? There are all manner of issues. And so currently for Nigerians, it's the good, the bad, the ugly. Many are crying that it is a bad act. Many are saying, oh, not too bad. Let's keep on trying to amend it. So for somebody who is watching you, who may not be completely conversant with, so what exactly is the Electoral Act of 2026? Why was there a need for amendment or review?
Okay, first, clearly, the 2022 Electoral Act brought in a whole lot of challenges, And by the way, for us, we know clearly there's no law that one will say is finite. No law, goes without giving a loophole. If not when the law is being passed, but shortly after the law has been passed, one will see, because of human nature and the dynamics in society, one will see the loopholes created by that law. The 2022 Electoral Act created a very big problem. And that problem was surrounded the issue of electronic transmission, electronic transfer, IREV, importance of IREV, mandatory, and real time. So that is the whole bottom. If you look at this election, many people were just keeping on those areas without looking at other gray areas. One would have said the National Assembly tried to amend. But I don't think there was any controversy, again, in the issue of this Electoral Act, because the beauty of democracy is that the majority will have their way, while the minority's voice will be heard. And those that call it controversy, if you take a look at the National Assembly members that were against it, you will see the display of democracy at its peak. You want a particular thing, and it wasn't there. And the major thing that one could pick in this Electoral Act is if I look at that electronic transmission of results, that particular clause has now been changed to give it a law and no longer administrative policy. In 2022, we know clearly that act allowed INEC to have it as administrative policy, which you cannot hold INEC against, whether they use IREF or not. And the Supreme Court adjudicated same, saying that it's not mandatory. But now, with the way the report is, IREF and uploading these results are now mandatory, and you must utilize it. Now, although the law created or the new act created what we say is a little bit loophole, where it says, what if he fails? I think that was cautionary. As we go deeper, we will understand that. Then the law tried to, tweak the way primaries are, conducted by political parties. This time around, it didn't give the political parties the leverage of having 3 options. It now limited it to only 2 options. So that you do direct primaries or you do consensus. So either of the two, the indirect primaries had been cancelled. Now, the law actually looked at those election offenses, those who decide to, buy voter buying and so on, and penalize them by putting something like, I think 5 million naira now, without option of fine. So I think these are a few things. Then they reduced the number of days, and they made it explicit that INEC should get our money at a designated time. So I think these are the hallmark for now. We have seen about the law, but until we begin to see details, the full gazetted, 2026 Electoral Act, we will now begin to say this was here and this is not here, or this is here and it was not there previously.
For somebody who is watching us now and they wants to know what you mean by direct and indirect primaries, they may not really understand that. So what exactly does it mean?
Direct primaries is where every member of the political party participates in selecting who leads the party candidates. It simply implies that the woman in Obomosho, the woman in Bumakataka, the woman in Udenu, the woman in Kefi, or the man, not only woman, the member who is a farmer would stand, queue in, and participate in selecting who becomes the party flag bearer. Now, unlike indirect, where it's expected that those people will vote those, or nominate those that will go representing them to cast ballot on their behalf. So that's like more of a collegiate, election. But direct primary simply implies everybody participates in that selection.
How would it happen at the presidential national convention?
Honestly speaking, it's going to be a problem.
because how would that happen?
Honestly speaking, what will
at
happen?
National convention.
No, what will happen is that when the parties, draw up their party primaries, I believe that what may actually happen is that these primaries will go on a stipulated day. They say it's a convention. I use the clause well, and I use the word
party members coming.
No, they will do that in their polling units and the wards, respective wards across the federation, and the results will be collated up to the national level.
Okay. The other one is consensus. Now, consensus calls for indirect party intimidation because a few people might just conspire and say this is consensus. How do you know when a consensus is not approved or when it is accepted?
In fact, for parties that do not have president as their presidential candidate or governor as their president, and you're a main party, consensus is not an option that will be prescribed for any political party. Because in consensus arrangement, it implies that people did not test their wells. And it's been proven, like in 2023 election, when we saw people that lost their primaries in political parties, like Enugu State here, many of those that went to Labour Party lost their primaries in PDP.
Yes.
And they went to general election and they won. They become National Assembly members and so on. So consensus to me is a more difficult position. Naturally, one would say it differs to the president or the governor if he's the member of the party to have an offer of refusal. So somebody would say we generally agree that is how it should go. But when it comes to political parties who are not in power, it becomes difficult to rally around consensus. It will be extremely difficult, especially when the people see that party as an option or a vehicle through which they could win an election.
Okay, does the act, by your understanding, strengthen or still make INEC vulnerable? Is INEC's independence guaranteed by this act?
To a certain extent, yes, because the act stipulates that INEC must have our money, intact at a certain stipulated period, so as not to, not to make them continuously run between the Accountant General of the Federation begging for their money. That's one. That's in theory. Then the act, to a reasonable extent, mandates political parties. I'm looking at the clause that says when they were debating it, that the INEC should have the cost to prove how an election was correctly done, and not the candidate that lost an election going to the tribunal to to prove that the election was rigged. So if that happens, if that is found in this act, I'll tell you it's a plus, because it will simply strengthen INEC, whatever you are doing. So you follow due process.
So if INEC announces the results that I don't agree, they have to defend what they've announced.
Exactly, that's what they are saying.
He puts the other person in jeopardy, so to speak.
The INEC or who?
No, the other candidate who lost. If INEC pronounces I've won an election, or okay, you've won an election, and I'm the one saying it is not, you want to do everything to prove that you won the election.
Now, the only way you would
it puts me in jeopardy.
No, you that won the election.
That lost the election.
No, let me tell you how.
Okay.
You see, if you have your candidates, how it will go, you can't just get up and say, INEC, prove to us that the person you announced won the election. INEC did that by announcing the result. So it is not left for you to say, in so and so places, there were infractions.
And if the powers are now with INEC, as far as we are concerned,
that means that you now have to ask INEC, push INEC to get their forensic analysis. So INEC will now bring the data they use. No longer the issue of you going to plead with INEC, I want to examine beavers. No, INEC will now bring the beavers, because they want to prove that they were transparent, not the other way around. That is, it's like I caught you as a thief, so prove to me you're not a thief. So it's going to be more. It's going to make INEC. After all, if that was scaled to, then the issue of IREF being mandatory now is another issue that I feel brought in a lot of transparency to the Electoral Act. Although people have been shouting about real time, which I said that will not work, because real time, people may not understand what it is. Real time simply implies that as we are sending it,
it must go.
It must go. So how does INEC guarantee that in a country where you have how many things that may make real time not to work? First, you have the machine itself. Number two, the operator may not be well, but let's say the operator wants to play a game. And then number three, you have the NCC and network providers. So it's not INEC that should guarantee you that. INEC's job is to bring the machine. So defending the real time because if they are put on real time could be used to in judiciary. You put it as a law that the election must be transferred in real time. So if it is transferred, even if it is transferred but not in real time, it means the election is not credible. So even if what you transferred was correct, by virtue of the electoral law, that particular clause has invalidated that process. So it now calls back the political parties to look at that process very well. But where the electoral law did not really touch, and I think it is the party members and the parties should look at this issue, is how internal process of political parties emerge.
The Electoral Act also touched on campaign financing. How much should be used by a presidential candidate and that. And then one that really caught my attention was personal donations that moved from 10 million to 500 million.
Let me tell you, that particular clause, I don't want to look at it because it is not of any relevance, practical relevance.
Well, what did they waste time doing that?
Yeah, it's just for semantics, and not semantics really, but to make.
How would they monitor that?
That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't make sense. Like, for example, in the last election, we saw the candidate of Labour Party has his funds, campaign fund, being executed by individuals that didn't make a cost to him. Somebody might get to print T-shirts and start giving people. So how do you begin to track such money? I don't know if you understand me. Somebody will come for a rally, declare food, people should drink, people should eat. How do you track such money? So it becomes difficult. So that's why I say those are just academic exercises.
I was taught early in life that one of the worst things that can happen to you is to make a law you cannot implement.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I said, in this country, how do you trace who gives what, who has not given what has been spent, what is not spent? Well, maybe there's a forensic way they are going to do that. But I think, I never say laws are only as effective as the implementation. Are there any challenges you have foreseen that could hinder the execution of the act?
Yes. In the first instance, I see a very serious issues. We are moving so hard for mandatory real-time transmission of the results. And I was a little bit taken aback because I've been in the midst of those who are IT surveying, and I was praying that that real time shouldn't be there, because I know clearly that that would not confer, electoral credibility to the extent people think it's going to confer. It's going to bring about transparency. So what I think, one is, first, the political parties. The act did not stipulate what the political parties will do except in the direct and indirect primaries. So there is so much work for them to do. I mean, that act should have made it clear that every party should have at least 75% of the polling unit, have its agents there. That becomes a prerequisite for you to say you won an election. Because all these things people started shouting because some persons believed that they won the 2023 election and they were rigged out, but they didn't have results on their, polling agents. So I think they maybe in future, having polling agents in at least 75% of the polling unit should be a prerequisite for people to participate at least at national, election, because that is the point where I see that a lot of rigging take place. And then apart from that, I see a situation whereby we might have voter buy-in, it's becoming alarming. In the last Anambra State election, we saw people paying as much as 20,000 naira to, buy one vote. So I wouldn't be surprised if I say that again. But I see, the transparency a little bit improved by saying that people must, upload the results. And maybe we might have a little bit of transparency. But I can tell you that it's going to be a little bit. Then the other one is the issue of budgeting. INEC budgeting this year had actually risen by quadrupled by almost times 3 of what we have in 2023. And I don't know where they will get that kind of money. So if our election is anchored on that, it might be a very difficult one. Then for the parties, political parties, the human resources required and the material resources required to conduct direct primaries is going to be a very big Herculean task. How will these political parties manage the fallout of those direct primaries without ending up in courts? So I think these are the challenges we might be looking at.
Well, do you foresee political interference in implementing the act? Or are you also, of course, our judiciary has been receiving a bashing of late from every part of Nigeria. There are security issues. The security agents sometimes being more active than voters.
First of all, political interference, you are playing politics. So there's no way you have political interference. That's the truth. What we are saying is let it not be obvious. I'd always maintain that statistics has it that over 90% of the second tenure elections, the president would always come back across the globe. So you could see that there is an element of political interference as a confounder to winning an election. It might not be a primary or necessary factor anyway, but you see that there's always an interference because they have they control the machineries. The state actors that are going to make sure that the process will be implemented fully. So I won't be surprised, if we see that, in place. Then we see again you mentioned judiciary. Unfortunately, it is the politicians that actually take the matter to the judiciary. If they conduct themselves in civilized ways, most of the judiciary bashing wouldn't have been there. And people, because we have varying ideas, we tend to agree to the judges that, talk to our emotions and disagree with others. So that's not a problem. Security can sign. I believe that between now and the next election, Nigeria will have at least not less than 80 to 90% of Nigerian territory under control. I believe that because if I take a look at what's happening in security sector over the last 2 months, the restructuring, the rearrangement, and then the campus we're getting, I found out that it's coming. Maybe having about 70 to 80% of the Nigeria, geographical area under the control of the federal government. So the hard to reach areas in terms of insecurity might be minimally reduced. Then you talked about, I think you talked about finance.
No, voter party.
Voter party. No, when candidates, I will say something about this voter party because we are using unclean data. We're using unclean data. Political parties have over the years been using, on INEC has over the years been using cumulative data since what I know they prepared at least as early as 2011. That data is not clean. So when you are going to look at the number of voters with respect to the number of registered voters, you are sure going to be having, voter apathy. But I think if that voter register is, cleaned up, we might begin to see that we may not be having voter apathy.
Use the consensus provision and that of direct primaries to the party called ADC. And I see three prominent people trying to vie for the presidential ticket of the ADC. That is Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, and Rotimi Amechi. By your own personal assessment, do you think consensus will work for ADC? And if it will not work, do you think direct primaries will also work for them?
Either of the two, either way, ADC has a problem. Remember, they've already been talking about this consensus, and Atiku had rejected it outrightly. I don't know what transpired between last week and now, but the much I know is that Atiku said was opting for primaries. Now,
he was hoping for indirect primaries.
Yes. But now Atiku has been knocked out of indirect primaries, which he has more control. But I can tell you that the primaries in ADC now is open. Depending on who has more grassroots support, will win it. So for me, if ADC goes in the direct primaries, it might pay them better off. Indirect would have been the best option for every political, because you will manage the crisis better off. You manage the outcome. But for direct primaries, you might have thousands of cases, including the ones that the ruling party may sponsor.
Okay, looking ahead to 2027 and beyond, public trust is deficit in Nigeria. People do not trust the political parties. White people do not trust INEC. They don't trust the security agents. They don't trust anybody. So do you think, and given what has happened, can this Electoral Act restore public trust in our elections?
It won't. It's as bad as that. Because the players are Nigerians. How has the average Nigerian handled the issue of Nigeria? Is it because it is INEC? Are we going to import people from the moon? The young chaps that will be at the polling units are Nigerians. If they go to places where the bargaining power favors them, then we might see them compromise. Not because the law itself wants you to compromise, but because the players are Nigerians. Have we been able to look at ourselves? Majority of us see our governors. Okay, let me give you a typical example. There's this trending video allegedly showing Governor Yusuf peeing by the roadside.
Was that good? Okay, I saw somebody wearing white.
White, yes.
I couldn't make a head or tail.
So the big question is, assume if that is true, how would that restore confidence of sanitation in our environment? Where the governor is obeying the call of nature in open, then shall if it is there.
You've not heard about the governor that the call of nature caught and he had to jump into the bush.
That's what I'm talking about. And I don't know if he was caught. No, that one was not caught in camera. this one is not caught, has not been caught in camera. So what am I trying to point out? The players are Nigerians. So I'm not expecting, what I think that will restore public confidence and public trust is when the leadership recalibrates the system. Everybody will feel, INEC cannot just be one, singled out to believe that INEC will have a pathway to, to restoring the hope Nigerians have on the electoral process. It's a cumulative thing, I must tell you. It's something that everybody, must, every other aspect should be able to be, to be in tune with. The judiciary, the legislative, the police, everybody, the ordinary citizen. That's the way I look at it.
Okay. Next is, do you think, having looked at the Electoral Act, can it in any way reduce post-election litigations, or will it increase it? Okay,
so post-election litigation will be based on how these people begin with their primaries. I must tell you that the politicians in Nigeria believe that the end justifies the means. Because of the last outing that happened in our political space, people would believe that if they go to court one way or the other way, they might win their court cases. So I'm not seeing the post-election litigation reduce, except in an exceptional way where INEC, conducts free, credible elections, and everybody sees that INEC has done her best.
Of course, grassroots democracy is one thing that makes a democracy very functional. That's when the people at the grassroots are able to participate and seeing that their participation remains valid. This Electoral Act, can it strengthen grassroots democracy?
Yes, yes.
And how?
Because
And how?
if a party adopts, direct primaries in the electoral process, it simply implies that the candidate must be known, at the grassroots basis. It's no longer importing a candidate from Abuja or anywhere and imposing it on the candidates, on the party members. So I think it's going to strengthen internal, strengthen the grassroots support for political parties. That will give birth to people joining parties for ideological, cases, on ideological cases.
If there are any ideology.
Yes, as I said, that will strengthen them. Because if you remember, in Second Republic, we saw MPP, MPN, permeating grassroots. So I think you should, that may do that. Then the other one is you look at the governors, the presidents that were going to be emerging. They will go back to the grassroots to mobilize and come up with how to strengthen their political parties.
As we come close to the end, I will just maybe want to ask you something, and that is what must stakeholders in the electoral process, what must they do? And that is government, INEC, parties, and citizens to ensure that 2027 is a success.
First, government has signed the act into law. I believe government should be able to release the money promptly and then follow the due process without interfering with INEC job. That's what I think. And then try to use the necessary bodies to arrest people that will truncate or derail the electoral process. Then number two, you talked about political parties. No, for INEC ensure that you adhere to this letters of the act. In this situation whereby you have any reason not to adhere to that, please recourse to the court if there's need for you to go to court. Otherwise, explain to Nigerians early enough. And if you are going to explain to Nigerians on issues that involve, direct technical end, please bring the technical experts. Not what Festus Okoye told us in 2023 that IRF is a mandatory, prerequisite, only for him not to appreciate, for him to see during the election talking from the other side of his mouth. So I believe that the INEC should be able to train our workers, tell them what their do's and don'ts are, and then be able to tell them what to do when they are demanded of accountability, both by the electorates and the political parties. So that's what I think INEC should do. Domesticate this Electoral Act, internalize it in your brains, and then I think that's the duty of INEC. And then number three, the parties, which is where the cocoa is. Political parties should stop blaming INEC. They should do their work. Go and get your structure. I remember there's a political party in last election when we shouted, please do not have a structure. They say Nigerians are their structures. When they went to the tribunal, they did not have one result sheet from any of the agents. And I said, this party is just talking nonsense. You won an election, you agents, you are giving result sheets, and you didn't see the result sheet to compute your result. So I think the political parties should have learned their lessons by now. They should have known that political parties have a whole lot of work to do. And then for the citizens, I can only say, come out, vote, do not accept money, do not accept vote buying, vote your conscience, and then make sure that electoral ballots are counted in your presence, and they are uploaded as stipulated by the law.
Okay, Doc, this conversation of ours can be complete without those who are actually our viewers who are watching us. And so I asked those who are out there to do what? To be part of this conversation. And my simple question to them is, do you believe the Electoral Act 2026 would change the electoral process in Nigeria for better? Send your comments, your questions, and join us on Facebook and YouTube at freedomsquaretv.com. Doc, quick responses. One, strength of the act. one major weakness of the Act, one urgent amendment needed, if at all, there should be one.
When strength on the Act has made the, it has given IREV a statutory, legal backing right now. So it's a strength, and people should be able to, INEC should be able to make use of that strength. Then one major weakness is fund.
We're rich enough to fund an election.
We are not rich enough. 1 trillion naira is not rich enough. We are Minister of Health is only getting 39 million, But I think one weakness is fund. And then urgent amendment, I can't foresee anything except that if they amend, then they should define what real time is. If you cannot say the election should be uploaded in real time without giving a timeline of what you mean by real time, otherwise it may become a legal hurdle for people to pass through, irrespective of the credibility of the election. Now, one prediction, the first prediction is very simple. The president is the man to beat. That's number one. If you like, stop me. But he is the man to beat anywhere in the world. Even if he's not doing well, he's the man to beat. And I can assure everybody, see, the man you're talking about, in the last few days, he has made some moves. If you really look at the dynamics happening in the economy now, you might see more before December. But he's the man to beat. And then the opposition is going to make a whole lot of, bring a whole lot of influence and, activities in the election.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chikezi Obasi, for your insights. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your responses. Thank you for your predictions. Thank you for making this conversation what it has been, a very, very conventional one. And of course, that has been Political Conversations on Freedom Square TV. Good evening, and stay politically conscious.